Hi, I'm Avery Thompson. Before I get into my story, please like and subscribe if you're interested in hearing about how I've dealt with some major family drama. Trust me, you won't want to miss this ride. I'm 32, doing great in my marketing career, and married to Michael, my high school sweetheart. On paper, things look perfect, but let me tell you, family dynamics can be a real nightmare. At our last family dinner, my mother-in-law, Barbara, looked at my dress and said, "Avery, darling, that dress is interesting." Her voice was dripping with fake sweetness. "I guess it's what's fashionable these days," she added. I forced a smile and replied, "Thanks, Barbara. It's actually a designer piece I got for a great price." Michael squeezed my hand under the table, his silent way of telling me to let it go, but it's hard to ignore years of subtle insults and coldness. Then, Michael's dad jumped in, completely ignoring me. "So Michael, how's that big project at work going? And don't even get me started on Samantha, Michael's sister. She's the worst." She smirked and said, "Oh Avery, remember when you tried to bring that vegan casserole to Thanksgiving? Bless your heart for trying." I held back my frustration, thinking about how they accidentally left my dish in the kitchen that year. I just smiled and said, "Well, you know me, always trying something new." Michael gave me an apologetic look, knowing how hard I'd tried with his family, but he always hoped things would get better on their own. Flashback to our wedding day, I was so excited to officially join the family. Barbara greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to the Petersons," she said. "I hope you'll fit in, eventually." 5 years later, I'm still waiting for that eventually. Back at the dinner, I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment alone. I stared at my reflection, giving myself a pep talk. "You're doing this for Michael," I whispered. "Stay strong." I returned to the dining room with a fake smile and asked, "Who's ready for dessert?" Trying to lighten the mood, Samantha rolled her eyes and said, "Some of us actually watch our figures, Avery." Before I could respond, Samantha's face twisted in pain. She clutched her side and gasped, I can't breathe." The room exploded into chaos. "Samantha," Barbara screamed, rushing to her daughter. "Call an ambulance," Michael's dad yelled, panic clear in his voice as Samantha collapsed to the floor. I froze, stunned by what was happening. Despite the years of cold treatment, seeing her like this hit me hard. I snapped out of it and shakily dialed 911. "It's going to be okay," I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. I heard myself saying, "Help is on the way," though I wasn't sure who I was trying to reassure. As we waited for the ambulance, the air was thick with fear and uncertainty. I couldn't help but wonder, would this crisis bring us closer together or push us further apart? The waiting room was a blur of white walls and the sharp smell of antiseptic. I couldn't shake the image of Samantha collapsing at dinner. Despite our differences, I never wanted anything bad to happen to her. Michael was pacing back and forth, his face full of worry. A doctor in a white coat approached us. "I'm Dr. Chen. I have news about Samantha," he said. We all gathered around him, holding our breath. "I'm afraid Samantha has end-stage renal disease. Her kidneys are failing, and she urgently needs a transplant." The news hit us hard. Mrs. Peterson started sobbing, and Mr. Peterson's face went pale. "What are our options, doctor?" Michael asked, his voice shaking. "We need to find a suitable donor quickly," Dr. Chen replied. "Family members are usually the best match. I'd recommend testing all of you." The next few days were a whirlwind of tests and anxious waiting. One by one, the Peterson family was ruled out as potential donors. The atmosphere grew tense with each negative result. Then came the shocking news. "Avery, you're a perfect match for Samantha," Dr. Chen announced. The room fell silent, and I felt everyone's eyes on me, filled with a mix of hope and expectation. Suddenly, the Petersons' attitude toward me changed. Mrs. Peterson, who had always been cold, was now all smiles. "Oh, Avery, dear, what wonderful news," she gushed, grabbing my hands. Mr. Peterson chimed in, "We always knew you were special, Avery. You're truly a blessing to this family." Their sudden affection felt strange and insincere. I mumbled something vague and excused myself to get some air. Later that evening, while I was getting coffee in the hospital cafeteria, Mr. and Mrs. Peterson cornered me. "Avery, we need to talk," Mr. Peterson said, his tone serious. "We know it's a big decision, but Samantha's life is at stake." Mrs. Peterson added, tears in her eyes, "You're part of this family now, and family takes care of each other." Mr. Peterson finished. "Michael would do the same for you in a heartbeat," Mr. Peterson said. their words making me feel trapped. I need time to think about this. It's a major surgery, I stammered. Time, Mrs. Peterson's voice rose. Samantha doesn't have time. Now, Mr. Peterson tried to calm his wife, before turning back to me. Just think about how this could affect your future with Michael. He's very close to his sister, you know. Their veiled threat hung in the air. I muttered something about needing to talk to Michael and hurried away, my head spinning. That night, as I pretended to sleep, I overheard Michael talking to his parents in the hallway. She just needs a little convincing, Michael said. I'll talk to her. Avery will come around. I'm sure of it. She has to. We can't lose Samantha, Mrs. Peterson hissed. Do whatever it takes, Michael. My heart pounded as I lay there. The family I had tried so hard to please was now plotting against me. I felt alone, scared, and utterly betrayed. The conversation left me in shock. I couldn't believe what Michael and his parents were planning. It was time to dig deeper into the family's past. I started with Samantha's medical records. It wasn't easy, but I managed to get them. What I found was shocking. Years of heavy drinking and drug use had destroyed her kidneys. The Petersons knew all along but had hidden the truth, enabling her behavior. I reached out to Michael's ex, Sarah. Hey Sarah, it's Avery. Can we meet for coffee? I need to ask you something important. Sarah agreed to meet, and over lattes, she spilled the truth. The Petersons? They're users. Avery. They treated me like family until I wasn't useful anymore. Then they threw me away like I was nothing. Her words sent chills down my spine. Everything made sense now. The cold treatment, the sudden kindness when they needed my kidney. I was just another pawn in their game. Next, I dug into the family business. After some creative digging, I uncovered a web of financial irregularities, and Michael's name was all over it. Confronting Michael was the hardest part. I laid out everything I'd discovered. What the hell, Avery? You've been snooping behind my back? Michael snapped. Can you blame me after what I overheard? I shot back. That was a private conversation, and what's wrong with wanting to save my sister's life? It's not about saving Samantha, it's about how your family has treated me for years, and now, suddenly, I'm their savior. You're being selfish. This is my sister we're talking about. Michael's face turned red. And I'm your wife, but that doesn't seem to matter to you or your family, I replied. The argument escalated until I dropped the bomb about the business. You're involved in fraud. Michael, did you think I wouldn't find out? His face went pale. It's not what you think. We had to do it to keep the business afloat. By breaking the law? By putting everything at risk? Michael stormed out, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The next day, I called a family meeting. Everyone gathered in the Petersons' living room, tension hanging thick in the air. I've made my decision, I announced. I won't be donating my kidney. The room erupted. Barbara jumped up, her face twisted with rage. You ungrateful little, after everything we've done for you. Mr. Peterson joined in. You'll regret this, Avery. We'll make sure Michael sees you for who you really are. Samantha, pale and weak, spoke up. I knew you were never really part of this family. I stood my ground as insults and threats flew. Michael sat there silently, torn between his family and me. I've seen your true colors now, I said calmly. You've used and manipulated people for years. I won't be your next victim, I said as I turned to leave. Michael finally spoke up. Avery, if you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. I paused at the doorway and looked back at the family that had never truly accepted me. Goodbye, Michael. I hope you realize what you're losing before it's too late. After that explosive meeting, I knew there was no turning back. I had to protect myself and expose the truth about the Petersons. I spent weeks gathering evidence, financial records, emails, even recordings of conversations. It felt like solving a twisted puzzle, each piece revealing more of their dark secrets. I reached out to my old friend, Emma, whom I hadn't spoken to in years. I really need your help, I said, my voice cracking. Avery? Oh my God, what's wrong? She asked, genuinely concerned. I told her everything, the manipulation, the fraud, the kidney donation mess. Emma listened without judgment and then said, You're coming to stay with me, no arguments. Her support was a lifeline. I realized how isolated I'd become in my marriage, cut off from my own support system. As I reconnected with old friends and family, I grew stronger every day. One night, after triple-checking my anonymous tip, I hit send on an email to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. My heart raced as I watched the sending icon spin. There was no going back now. The investigation moved quickly. Within weeks, news broke of a major fraud probe into the Peterson family business. I watched from a distance as their carefully crafted image fell apart. Michael called me in a panic. "Avery, what have you done? The feds are all over the office." "I didn't do anything, Michael," I said calmly. "The truth is finally coming out." He paused, then said quietly, "I'm sorry, Avery. I should have listened to you, but it was too late for apologies. I had already filed for divorce, using the evidence I'd gathered to ensure a fair settlement." In the end, Michael stayed loyal to his family, not me. The fallout was huge. The company was charged with fraud and embezzlement, and Michael and his parents faced serious jail time. Samantha's substance abuse issues came to light during the investigation, jeopardizing her spot on the transplant list. As for me, I focused on rebuilding my life. I started a support group for people who had escaped manipulative family situations. It became my way of turning all that pain into something positive, helping others while finally freeing myself from the Petersons' control. At our first meeting, a woman tearfully shared, "I never thought I'd be strong enough to leave." "But you did," I reassured her, "and that's what matters." Months passed, and I was having lunch with Emma when breaking news flashed on the TV in the restaurant. The Petersons were being led out of court in handcuffs. "Holy," Emma whispered, "they're actually going to prison." I felt a swirl of emotions: relief, vindication, and a twinge of sadness for what could have been. Later that week, I got an unexpected call. It was Samantha. "Avery, it's me. I got a kidney, an anonymous donor." "That's great, Samantha. I'm happy for you," I replied, unsure of what else to say. There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, Avery, for everything. You were right about us." After a moment, I simply said, "I hope you make the most of this second chance, Samantha. Goodbye." As I hung up, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. The Petersons were finally facing justice, their reputation and finances in ruins, but most importantly, I was free. That night, I wrote in my journal, "A year ago, I thought I had the perfect life. Now I realize it was all a carefully constructed lie." But the truth, as painful as it was, set me free. I stood up for myself, exposed the lies, and walked away. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. To anyone out there facing a similar situation, remember, you're stronger than you know. Don't let anyone manipulate you into sacrificing your own well-being. Your life is yours, and you deserve to live it on your own terms. I closed the journal, proud of how far I had come. I had survived the Petersons, and now, I was thriving. That was the best revenge of all. The story of Avery and the Petersons has come to an end. Now, I have a question for you. If you were in Avery's shoes, would you have donated your kidney to Samantha, despite all the mistreatment from the Peterson family? Or do you think Avery made the right choice by prioritizing her own well-being?
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. "Take care." That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. "I will do my best." Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. "Did you not hear what I said?" "I'm sorry." I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.